Hello everyone, my name is Asha Gopinath and I will be presenting my Polygence project on algal textiles. I chose this research topic because I wanted to explore both creative and scientific disciplines, particularly biology, and this project perfectly encompasses for me. I started this project with the question of how algae can be used to form a sustainable textile material, and my objective was to design less wasteful fabrics. To give some background, the fashion industry makes up 10% of global carbon emissions, and with the growing support of fast fashion, almost 3.8 billion pounds of clothes are thrown away every year. Recently, companies have been using living organisms to create fabrics and finding other ways to become more sustainable, such as these solutions, a leather made of fungus, silk dyed with bacteria, and bolt threads, which replicates the silk made by spiders through engineered yeast. In this presentation, I will give my 2 ways I created sustainable textiles, starting with the physical ones I made from seaweed from a local beach, and following it up with the hypothetical textiles I designed to be made from bioengineered E. coli, which produces cellulose. I will discuss the garment I designed and then the applications for my project. So first, my physical textiles. I ran 6 trials to complete this project. The materials I ended up using were seaweed, glycerin, agar powder, and water. My starting protocol involved collecting algae and then adding a mixture of glycerin, agar, and water to a petri dish with seaweed, and then letting them dry out for a week or 2. The first issue that I encountered was the ratio of materials I added to the textiles, which resulted in a brittle texture. And after correcting this, the most prominent problem was the growth of mold and bacteria due to the organisms which I gathered from the environment. So after using different alternatives for the base of the pattern and sterilizing the plates, the textiles were successful in their texture and durability, which felt a lot like fabric, but the mold made it nearly impossible to create an actual piece of clothing. In a lab, I would sterilize my samples and add fungicide and scale up to create more textiles in less time. Now for the hypothetical bioengineered textiles. So I first researched possible compounds in microalgae I could use to transform the E. coli, and therefore to produce cellulose, or the compound I would use. I concluded that I would use cellulose from Nanocropsis oceanica, a type of microalgae, and transform E. coli to produce cellulose at a faster rate. So I chose cellulose as many fabrics already use this compound, such as cotton and viscose. It is also highly biodegradable, making it sustainable. And I chose Nanocropsis oceanica because it has a sturdy cell wall made up of cellulose, and its genome is already sequenced. So there's already a protocol that has been made on Nanocropsis and on how to manipulate the DNA. So I didn't have to figure that out. My method to transform DNA to isolate the SESA gene, which is used to produce cellulose, and using it in a process called ligation, which is basically gluing together the Nanocropsis DNA and bacterial DNA. I would create pores in the bacterial cell walls, allowing the DNA to enter and transform the bacterial DNA. I would then let the E. coli replicate and harvest the cellulose that it created. Here is a picture of the plasmid I designed, which has the SESA2 gene under the control of the lac promoter, allowing for a higher expression of the gene. The plasmid also has an ampicillin resistance, so I could isolate which bacteria actually took up the plasmid. So how can we use this? Well, for the physical textiles, they could be a unique and sustainable alternative to fabrics with leather-like qualities. Though my process, they were more effective for handmade artisan pieces, they could be optimized to be more reproducible. For the hypothetical textiles, the most common barrier currently against sustainable development in the fashion industry is economic feasibility. But my process and the use of E. coli would be more cost-effective and grow cellulose at a faster rate, thus producing more cellulose in total. And as cellulose is already an effective fiber for clothing, creating a more sustainable harvesting process and final product would only be an improvement. Now for the design of the actual garment. So my inspiration for this piece began with patchwork crochet projects, as it is already something I'm familiar with. And based on my textiles, I felt they fit this aesthetic. They also reminded me of lace and dried flora, and I created a mood board based on these keywords. I sketched out some skirt designs using my inspiration. The first design featured separate uses of the hypothetical and physical textiles, while the second incorporated them both into layering fabric. Lastly, here are my references, and thank you so much for your time.